Before we start, tell me where you are listening from in the comments. Maybe you are someone who thinks successful people always have everything under control. Maybe you assume that having built revolutionary companies means you can predict and prepare for any future challenge. Maybe you have never sat awake at 3 in the morning, staring at data that tells you everything you thought you knew about the world is about to change in ways that will test every person's character and resilience. This conversation is for you. I want to tell you about the most difficult decision I've ever had to make. Whether to share information that will fundamentally change how you see the next few months of 2025, or to protect you from knowledge that might cause panic but could also save your life and the lives of the people you care about most. This is not about business announcements or product launches or any of the usual topics that people associate with my companies. This is about something much more personal and urgent. Patterns I've been tracking across all sectors of society that indicate September 2025 will mark the beginning of the most significant period of change in human history, and why most people are completely unprepared for what's coming. Today I want to share what I've discovered because I believe you deserve to know the truth, even if that truth is difficult to accept and will require you to make choices about your life, your family, and your future that you never thought you would have to make. The sleepless nights began 6 months ago when I started noticing patterns in data from multiple sources that individually seemed like isolated problems, but together painted a picture so concerning that I initially thought I was making connections that weren't really there. Government contracts were being moved from October to August with unusual urgency. Major investors were quietly withdrawing assets from certain sectors while dramatically increasing positions in others. Supply chain partners in Asia and Europe were changing delivery schedules in ways that suggested they knew something about September that they weren't discussing publicly. But what kept me awake wasn't just the business and economic indicators. It was the realization that everything I've built, everything I've worked toward for decades, might not matter if people aren't prepared for the kind of disruption that these patterns suggest is approaching. I've spent the last 3 months trying to convince myself that I was reading too much into coincidental trends, that my tendency to see problems before other people notice them was creating false alarms about situations that would resolve themselves normally. But last week, I received information that removed any doubt about what's coming and forced me to confront the fact that staying silent would be a betrayal of everyone who trusts me to be honest about challenges that affect all of our futures. The weight of carrying this knowledge alone has been overwhelming. I found myself looking at my children and wondering how to prepare them for a world that might be fundamentally different from the one they're growing up in now. I've had conversations with advisors and friends where I've tried to hint at my concerns without creating the kind of panic that could make everything worse. Most difficult of all, I've had to accept that even with all the resources and influence at my disposal, there are some challenges that no individual can solve alone, and that the best I can do is provide people with the information they need to protect themselves and their families. What I'm about to tell you is based on analysis of data from government sources, financial institutions, supply chain networks, and behavioral patterns of world leaders that all point to the same conclusion. September 2025 will bring changes that will test everything we thought we knew about economic stability, social cooperation, and individual resilience. The first indicator is the massive shift in government contracts and emergency preparedness spending that has been accelerated from later in the year to August. Agencies that normally plan months or years in advance are acting with urgency that suggests they have specific information about threats or challenges that require immediate preparation. These moves are being made by people who have access to information that isn't available to the general public, and their behavior suggests they're expecting changes that will make current investment strategies ineffective or dangerous. The third indicator is the behavior of international partners and suppliers who are changing their operations and delivery schedules in ways that suggest they're preparing for disruptions to global transportation and communication networks. These aren't the kind of adjustments companies make for normal business reasons. They're the kind of preparations that suggest people expect September to bring challenges that will affect basic infrastructure and international cooperation. But the pattern that concerns me most is what I've observed in the behavior of world leaders and their families over the past few months. Travel schedules, security arrangements, and public appearances have been modified in ways that suggest they're preparing for a period when normal diplomatic and governmental functions might be interrupted or dangerous. These people have access to intelligence and information that allows them to prepare for challenges before they become public knowledge, and their behavior indicates they're expecting September to bring the kind of disruption that requires personal safety measures and alternative arrangements for maintaining leadership during crisis periods. The personal toll of carrying this knowledge has been devastating. Last Tuesday, I sat in my kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at my phone, where I had drafted and deleted the same message to my team 17 times. How do you tell people you care about that their assumptions about the future might be fundamentally wrong without destroying their ability to function in the present? I found myself crying for the first time in years, but from the weight of knowing that millions of families are making plans for September school years, October business quarters, and November holidays that may never happen the way they're imagining. The hardest moment came when my daughter asked me to help her plan her birthday party for October. As I looked at her excited face, talking about decorations and guest lists, I felt something break inside me. How do you maintain a child's innocence while also preparing them for a world that might demand resilience they've never needed to develop? I've started having conversations with my children that I never thought I would need to have. Not apocalyptic warnings that would terrify them, but gentle discussions about adaptability, about finding strength in family connections, about the difference between material security and inner security. Dad, why do you look sad sometimes when you think we're not watching? My son X asked me last week. The directness of his question forced me to realize that my attempts to shield him from my concerns weren't working. Children sense when the adults around them are carrying burdens, even when those burdens aren't explicitly discussed. I've been losing weight from stress, sleeping poorly, and finding it difficult to focus on routine business matters when I know that everything we're working toward might need to be fundamentally reconsidered in a matter of weeks. The isolation has been perhaps the most difficult aspect. I can't discuss these concerns with most of my advisors without creating the kind of internal panic that could compromise our ability to respond effectively when the time comes. I can't share them with friends without potentially destroying their peace of mind during what might be their last few weeks of normal life. Last Sunday, I found myself at my mother's house for what was supposed to be a routine family dinner. As I watched her discussing plans for her garden next spring, talking about which flowers she wanted to plant, and how she hoped to host family gatherings in her backyard, I felt a physical pain in my chest. She looked so peaceful, so confident in the continuity of her world, making plans with the kind of certainty that I no longer feel about anything. I wanted to tell her to enjoy every moment of these quiet summer evenings, to treasure the simplicity of worrying about flower varieties instead of societal stability. But how do you tell your 78-year-old mother that the world she's known for decades might be ending without breaking her heart or destroying the peace she's earned through a lifetime of challenges she's already overcome? Instead, I found myself memorizing everything about that evening. The way the late afternoon light fell across her kitchen table, the sound of her laugh when she talked about her neighbor's mischievous cat, the comfortable routine of family conversation that assumed tomorrow would be similar to today. I stayed longer than usual that night, helping her with small tasks around the house that suddenly felt precious and important. When she asked if I was feeling all right because I seemed unusually quiet and attentive, I told her I was just grateful for these moments together. The look she gave me suggested she sensed something deeper in my words, but she didn't push for explanations. Sometimes the people who love you most know when to simply accept your presence as a gift without demanding to understand all the reasons behind it. The drive home was one of the most difficult of my life. I kept thinking about all the elderly people in the world who are counting on September to be just another month in lives that have already seen enough disruption and uncertainty. People who deserve to spend their remaining years in peace rather than having to adapt to fundamental changes in how society operates. My own children have started asking why I've been spending more time at home lately, why I've been more insistent about family dinners and weekend activities. They're not used to me prioritizing family time over work demands, and they can sense that something has shifted in my priorities even if they don't understand what's driving the change. 3 nights ago, my youngest asked me if we were going to move away, because I had been asking unusual questions about what belongings were most important to them and whether they would be okay living somewhere different if we needed to. I realized that my attempts to prepare them psychologically had been transparent enough to create anxiety without providing the context that would help them understand why these conversations were necessary. The balancing act of preparation without panic has become exhausting. Every conversation feels like a potential mistake. Either I'm saying too much and creating fear, or I'm saying too little and leaving people I care about unprepared for challenges that could overwhelm them. Even my closest relationships have been strained by the weight of what I can't say. When people ask about my plans for the fall, I find myself giving vague responses that feel dishonest but seem necessary to avoid conversations I'm not ready to have. The responsibility feels crushing some days. People trust me to be honest about challenges that affect their futures, but they also trust me not to create unnecessary panic about problems that might resolve themselves or might not be as severe as my analysis suggests. I've spent hours staring at social media posts from people excitedly planning September vacations, fall weddings, and back-to-school preparations, feeling like I'm watching people decorate the deck of a ship that's heading toward an iceberg they can't see yet. The guilt of potentially knowing something that could help them prepare, combined with the fear of being wrong and creating chaos for no reason, has created an emotional burden that I'm not sure how to carry much longer. What all of these patterns suggest is that September 2025 will mark the beginning of a new type of crisis that combines economic disruption, supply chain breakdown, energy challenges, and social upheaval in ways that will require every person to fundamentally reconsider how they approach work, relationships, and daily survival. This isn't about predicting specific events or claiming to know exactly what will happen on particular dates. This is about recognizing that multiple independent indicators are pointing toward the same time period and the same types of challenges, and that waiting until these challenges become obvious to everyone will mean waiting too long to prepare effectively. The emotional weight of understanding these patterns has been almost unbearable. I wake up every morning knowing that millions of people are making plans and decisions based on assumptions about stability and continuity that may not hold true much longer. I see families saving money for vacations they might not be able to take, people planning career moves that might become irrelevant, students choosing educational paths that might not lead to the opportunities they expect. The hardest part is knowing that the people who will be most affected by the coming changes are those who can least afford to lose what they've worked so hard to build. Families with modest savings, small business owners, people approaching retirement who need stability and predictability to maintain their quality of life. These are the people I think about when I consider whether to share this information publicly. They deserve the opportunity to make informed decisions about their futures, even if those decisions are difficult and the information is frightening. But I also worry about creating panic that could accelerate or worsen the very problems I'm trying to help people prepare for. There's a delicate balance between providing useful warnings and causing the kind of social disruption that makes everything more dangerous for everyone. After months of internal debate, I've decided that the ethical choice is to share what I know and trust that people will use this information responsibly to protect themselves and their communities, rather than to create chaos or take advantage of others who are less prepared. For those over 60, this information is particularly important because the coming changes will disproportionately affect people who depend on stable institutions, predictable income sources, and reliable healthcare systems. If you're in this age group, the advice I would give my own parents is this: ensure that you have savings that can be accessed without depending on normal banking systems. Maintain supplies of medications and basic necessities that don't require just-in-time delivery networks, and strengthen relationships with family and neighbors who could provide mutual support during difficult periods. Most importantly, prepare psychologically for the possibility that September will bring the kind of uncertainty that requires flexibility, patience, and the ability to find meaning and stability through relationships and personal resilience rather than through external systems and institutions. For younger people, the challenge will be different but equally significant. You'll need to be prepared for career disruptions, economic instability, and social changes that will require new approaches to building security and finding purpose. The skills that will matter most are those that help people adapt to changing circumstances, support their communities during difficult times, and maintain hope and determination when familiar structures and expectations no longer provide reliable guidance. What's coming in September isn't the end of the world, but it may be the end of the world as we've known it for the past several decades. The people who thrive during this transition will be those who prepare not just practically but emotionally and spiritually for a period that will test everything we thought we knew about what's possible and what's permanent. Let me be more specific about what I believe will unfold, because you deserve to know exactly what the data is pointing toward. Even though sharing these details makes me feel like I'm lighting a fuse that I can't put out once it's lit. The first wave will hit our food systems. The supply chain disruptions I've been tracking suggest that by mid-September, grocery stores will struggle to maintain normal inventory levels. Not empty shelves immediately, but noticeable shortages of items we take for granted. Fresh produce, certain meats, processed foods that depend on complex manufacturing chains. These will become scarce or disappear entirely from many areas. This isn't speculation based on economic models. This is based on shipping contracts that have been canceled, warehouse closures that haven't been announced publicly, and agricultural production changes that won't be obvious until harvest time arrives and the food simply isn't there. The psychological impact of seeing empty sections in supermarkets will trigger behavioral changes that accelerate the problem. When people realize that abundance isn't guaranteed, they'll begin hoarding, which will create actual shortages even in areas where the supply disruption would have been manageable. The second phase will involve energy systems failing in ways that most people haven't experienced in their lifetimes. Not dramatic blackouts like in disaster movies, but rolling shortages that affect different regions at different times. Power grids that can't meet demand during peak hours. Gasoline stations that run dry for days at a time. Heating systems that work intermittently during the critical transition into fall weather. The interconnected nature of modern infrastructure means that energy disruptions cascade into everything else. When power becomes unreliable, communication networks become unstable. When communication becomes spotty, coordination between essential services breaks down. When services can't coordinate effectively, the simple logistics of daily life become complicated and stressful. I'm sharing this not to create fear, but to provide the opportunity for preparation. Those who understand what's coming and take appropriate action will be positioned not just to survive the coming changes, but to help others and to build something better from whatever emerges. September will bring change, but not catastrophe. It will bring challenges, but also opportunities for those who are ready. Most importantly, it will reveal what really matters when everything else becomes uncertain. Share this with people who need time to prepare. Subscribe if you want to understand how to navigate the changes that no one else is talking about openly. And remember, knowing what's coming is only valuable if you use that knowledge to become stronger, more prepared, and more capable of helping others when they need it most.